This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.
The quaint village of Wahlheim stirred to life on a crisp May morning. It was the fourth day of the month when Werther, a young and passionate artist, arrived in this idyllic haven. The air hummed with possibility, matching the eager anticipation in Werther's heart as he stepped off the dusty road. His eyes widened, drinking in the breathtaking scenery that unfolded before him like a living canvas. Rolling hills painted in vibrant shades of green stretched as far as the eye could see. Ancient forests stood sentinel, their leaves whispering secrets of centuries past. The breeze carried the sweet scent of wildflowers and freshly baked bread, a heady mixture that made Werther's head spin with delight. As he made his way through the village, Werther's heart swelled with an inexplicable joy. Charming cottages lined the narrow streets, their thatched roofs like crowns atop weathered stone walls. The rhythmic clucking of chickens and the distant lowing of cattle created a soothing symphony of rural life. A kindly widow, her face a map of a life well lived, offered Werther lodging. Her cottage, nestled at the edge of the village, became his sanctuary. The worn wooden floors creaked beneath his feet, telling tales of generations past. From this cozy base, Werther set out each day to explore his new world, sketchbook in hand and wonder in his heart. The countryside became Werther's muse. He spent hours perched on hillsides, his nimble fingers dancing across the page, capturing the play of light on distant meadows. The local peasants, initially wary of this stranger with his strange tools, soon warmed to his presence. Their weathered hands and sun-kissed faces told stories of hard work and simple pleasures, inspiring Werther to see beauty in the everyday. Children flocked to Werther like moths to a flame, drawn by his infectious enthusiasm and kind eyes. His pockets always seemed to hold some small treasure, a shiny pebble, a twisted piece of wood that looked like a dragon. He regaled them with fantastical tales, his voice rising and falling as he spun yarns of far-off lands and magical creatures. Their laughter echoed through the village, a joyous soundtrack to his days. In the quiet evenings, Werther poured his heart onto paper, writing long, impassioned letters to his dear friend Wilhelm. His words painted vivid pictures of his new life, the golden sunsets that set the sky ablaze, the gentle babbling of the nearby stream, the sense of peace that had settled into his very bones. With each letter, he felt himself growing, changing, becoming more attuned to the rhythms of nature and the simple joys of rural life. The local pastor and his wife became frequent companions, their cottage a haven for stimulating discourse. Over steaming cups of tea, they debated the finer points of literature, delved into philosophical quandaries, and explored the mysteries of faith. Werther found himself challenged and invigorated by these conversations, his mind expanding like the vista before him. It was Hans, a young farmhand with calloused hands and a quick smile, who truly opened Werther's eyes to the intricacies of village life. Together they tended to crops, mended fences, and cared for livestock. Werther's soft hands grew tougher, his respect for the land and its caretakers deepening with each passing day. The earthy smell of freshly turned soil and the satisfying ache in his muscles at day's end grounded him in ways he had never experienced before. As spring melted into summer, Werther fell into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. His mornings began with long walks through dewy fields, the world still hushed and full of promise. Afternoons found him by the river, his sketches capturing the dance of light on water, the graceful arc of a heron's neck. And in the evenings he lay on his back in fragrant meadows, watching as the sky transformed into a glittering tapestry of stars. With each passing day, a sense of contentment took root in Werther's heart, growing stronger and more vibrant than the wildflowers that dotted the hillsides. He felt as though he had stumbled upon a secret garden, a place where his artistic soul could unfurl its petals and bask in the warmth of inspiration. As he gazed out over the patchwork of fields and forests, Werther's heart swelled with optimism. Here in this picturesque setting, he believed he had found not just a home, but a future brimming with creative possibility. Yet as the days grew longer and warmer, a restlessness began to stir within Werther. The contentment he had found in Wahlheim was undeniable, but a part of him yearned for something more, a connection he couldn't quite name. When news of a grand ball in a nearby village reached his ears, Werther felt a thrill of excitement. Little did he know that as he prepared for this seemingly innocent social event, fate was quietly setting the stage for a moment that would change everything. On June 16th, Werther's life took an unexpected turn. He attended a ball in a nearby village, unaware that this event would forever alter the course of his future. The warm summer air caressed Werther's skin as he approached the village, carrying with it the sweet perfume of blooming flowers. The sky above him was a masterpiece of soft pinks and oranges, as if nature itself was setting the stage for the magical evening to come. His heart quickened with anticipation, though he couldn't have known why. Just before entering the bustling ballroom, Werther's attention was caught by a scene that made him pause in his tracks. A young woman, her beauty as radiant as the setting sun, stood surrounded by a group of children. Her movements were a dance of their own, graceful and tender as she tended to the little ones. Werther found himself transfixed, unable to look away from this living portrait of maternal love. The woman's patience seemed infinite, her touch gentle yet sure as she managed the group with effortless care. It was as if Werther was witnessing love itself made flesh, and something deep within his soul stirred in response. He couldn't have named the feeling if he tried, but it left him breathless all the same. Finally tearing himself away, Werther entered the ballroom. The space was alive with color and music, a whirlwind of sensations that threatened to overwhelm him. Couples twirled across the polished floor, their laughter a counterpoint to the orchestra's melody. Amidst the sea of faces, Werther's eyes instinctively sought out the young woman he had seen earlier. As if answering an unspoken wish, Charlotte's cousin approached, offering to introduce them. Time seemed to slow as Werther and Charlotte began to dance, her hand in his feeling like the most natural thing in the world. Their steps flowed as smoothly as their conversation, Charlotte's wit sparkling like the chandeliers above. "Klopstock!" Charlotte exclaimed at one point, her face aglow with enthusiasm. Werther's heart skipped a beat, amazed to find someone who shared his admiration for the poet. With each word exchanged, each shared laugh, Werther felt himself falling deeper under Charlotte's spell. Just as Werther began to lose himself in the moment, Charlotte's voice took on a softer tone. "I should mention," she said, her eyes meeting his, "I'm engaged to Albert. He's away on business at the moment." The words hit Werther like a physical blow, threatening to throw him off balance. Yet even as a part of him ached at the revelation, he couldn't deny the connection he felt with Charlotte. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere in the ballroom began to shift. The air grew heavy, charged with an electric energy that seemed to mirror Werther's own tumultuous emotions. Suddenly a crack of thunder shook the building, and rain began to pour from the darkened sky. Werther and Charlotte found themselves drawn to a nearby window, watching as the storm transformed the world outside. Lightning illuminated their faces in brief, dramatic flashes, creating an intimate bubble amidst the crowded room. In those moments, as they stood side by side, Werther felt a connection so profound it almost took his breath away. The storm outside echoed the tumult in Werther's heart. Each flash of lightning revealed Charlotte's beauty anew, etching her image deeper into his mind. The rumble of thunder matched the pounding of his pulse, a rhythm that spoke of newfound passion and the thrill of possibility. As the evening drew to a close and they prepared to part ways, Werther found himself in a state of emotional upheaval. His mind raced with thoughts of Charlotte, replaying every moment, every smile, every word they had shared. He left the ball in a daze, his heart soaring with the conviction that he had found a kindred spirit in Charlotte. The journey home was a blur, the countryside cloaked in the aftermath of the storm. Werther's thoughts were a whirlwind, centered entirely on the enchanting woman he had just met. As he finally reached his lodgings, he was filled with a mix of elation and turmoil, knowing that this night had changed everything. Sleep eluded Werther that night, his mind too full of Charlotte and the promise of what tomorrow might bring. As the first light of dawn crept through his window, he made a decision. He would see her again, no matter what it took. Little did he know, this resolve would set in motion a series of events that would consume his every waking moment in the weeks to come. The weeks following the ball passed in a whirlwind for Werther. He found himself irresistibly drawn to Charlotte's home, his visits becoming more frequent with each passing day. Summer unfurled around them like a vibrant tapestry, the air thick with the scent of blooming flowers and sun-warmed grass. Werther's world narrowed to the orbit of Charlotte's presence, each moment away from her feeling like an eternity. He invented increasingly flimsy reasons to visit, his heart racing as he approached her door. In Charlotte's home, Werther threw himself into assisting with her younger siblings. His hands trembled slightly as he helped a young girl form her letters, acutely aware of Charlotte's approving smile from across the room. The soft scratch of pencil on paper mingled with childish giggles and Charlotte's gentle instructions, creating a symphony of domestic bliss that made Werther's chest ache with longing. Together they wove fantastical tales for wide-eyed children, their voices blending in perfect harmony. Werther watched, mesmerized as Charlotte brought characters to life with graceful gestures and expressive eyes. In these moments, she seemed to glow from within, radiating a warmth that drew him ever closer. Their conversations flowed like a meandering stream, touching on art, literature, and the very essence of life itself. Werther found in Charlotte a kindred spirit, her insights illuminating corners of his mind he never knew existed. As they strolled through the village on Charlotte's errands, the mundane world seemed to shimmer with newfound beauty. The cobblestone streets, the quaint shops, even the weathered faces of villagers, all were transformed in the light of their shared observations. Even the most tedious household tasks became treasured moments when shared with her. Werther's clumsy attempts at domesticity elicited Charlotte's musical laughter, a sound that sent shivers down his spine. He found himself deliberately fumbling with simple tasks just to hear that enchanting melody again. Charlotte's circle of friends embraced Werther like a long-lost brother. Festivals became riots of color and joy, the air filled with music and the tantalizing aroma of local delicacies. Picnics transformed into feasts for both body and soul, with lively debates and heartfelt conversations stretching long into the afternoon. Evenings passed in a haze of candlelight and whispered confidences beneath star-strewn skies. With each gathering, Werther felt himself becoming more deeply woven into the tapestry of Charlotte's life. Yet as his feelings for Charlotte grew, so too did an ache that nestled beneath his ribs. She began to take on an almost mythic quality in his mind, a living, breathing embodiment of all he had ever dreamed of in a companion. His sketchbook filled with her likeness, Charlotte laughing in the sunlight, her head thrown back in unrestrained joy. Charlotte lost in thought by the window, her profile etched against the fading light. Charlotte's hands gracefully tending to her siblings, each line capturing the tenderness of her touch. Each drawing was an attempt to capture the essence of her, yet always fell short of the luminous reality. Throughout it all, Charlotte maintained a delicate balance. Her warmth towards Werther was genuine, her eyes sparkling with affection whenever he entered the room. Yet there remained an invisible line she would not cross, a boundary as tangible as a glass wall between them. The name Albert peppered their conversations like tiny pinpricks, each mention a reminder of the chasm between Werther's desires and reality. He found himself both yearning for and dreading these moments, torn between the joy of Charlotte's friendship and the growing turmoil within his heart. In the quiet hours of the night, Werther poured his conflicted soul onto paper, his letters to Wilhelm a lifeline to sanity. The words flowed like a fever dream, capturing both the intoxicating happiness of Charlotte's presence and the creeping dread of a love that could never be fully realized. His quill scratched frantically across the parchment, ink splattering like drops of his own blood. As he sealed each letter, Werther felt the weight of his emotions threatening to pull him under, even as he clung desperately to the buoyant joy of each moment spent in Charlotte's radiant company. The summer days stretched on, each one both a blessing and a torment. Werther's world had become a kaleidoscope of contradictions, exquisite joy and crushing despair, hope and resignation, love and an ever-present sense of loss. He walked a tightrope of emotion, teetering between ecstasy and anguish with each passing hour. As June gave way to July, a change hung in the air like the charged atmosphere before a storm. Werther could sense it, a shift in the delicate balance he had been maintaining. The mention of Albert's name became more frequent in Charlotte's conversation, her eyes taking on a distant look that sent a chill through Werther's heart. Something was coming, something that threatened to shatter the fragile world he had built around Charlotte's presence. On the last evening of June, as they sat together in the fading light of her garden, Charlotte turned to Werther with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I received a letter today," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Albert will be returning soon." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Werther felt his world tilt on its axis, the ground beneath his feet suddenly unstable. As darkness fell around them, he was left to wonder, what would Albert's return mean for the delicate dance he and Charlotte had been performing all summer? July brought a significant shift to Werther's life in Wahlheim. Albert, Charlotte's fiancé, returned from his business trip, setting the stage for a complex interplay of emotions and relationships. The morning of Albert's arrival dawned with a cruel brightness, the summer sun beating down on Werther's shoulders as he made his way to Charlotte's home. His heart hammered against his ribs, each step feeling like a march towards his own execution. The air was thick with the scent of blooming roses, their sweetness almost cloying in its intensity. As he rounded the corner, he saw them. Charlotte and Albert stood in the garden, wrapped in an embrace that spoke of long separation and joyful reunion. Charlotte's face was alight with happiness, her smile as radiant as the sun above. Werther's stomach churned, a bitter taste rising in his throat. Steeling himself, Werther approached the couple, forcing his lips into a smile that felt more like a grimace. To his surprise, Albert greeted him with genuine warmth, his handshake firm and friendly. As they talked, Werther found himself reluctantly impressed by Albert's quick wit and easy charm. The man's kindness made it difficult for Werther to hate him, despite the jealousy that gnawed at his insides like a ravenous wolf. In the days that followed, the three fell into a routine that was both comforting and torturous for Werther. Long afternoons were spent in spirited debates, their voices rising and falling like waves against a shore. Albert's knowledge of the natural world added a new dimension to their countryside walks, the man's enthusiasm infectious as he pointed out rare birds and plants. These outings were a double-edged sword for Werther. He reveled in Charlotte's company, drinking in her laughter and the way her eyes sparkled when she spoke passionately about a topic. But each small gesture between the engaged couple was like a dagger to his heart. The casual way Albert's hand would find the small of Charlotte's back, or the silent conversations they seemed to have with just a glance across the dinner table. Each moment a stark reminder of what Werther could never have. Desperate to escape the growing despair that threatened to consume him, Werther threw himself into developing a friendship with Albert. They discovered a shared love for hunting and chess, spending many evenings locked in friendly competition. The soft click of chess pieces and the warm glow of the fireplace created an atmosphere of camaraderie. But even in these moments, Werther couldn't fully shake the ache in his chest. As summer stretched on, Werther's emotions became as unpredictable as a storm-tossed sea. One moment he would be laughing and joking with the couple, feeling a sense of belonging. The next, a dark cloud would descend upon him, and he would retreat into himself, feeling like a ghost haunting the edges of their perfect world. During group outings, Werther often found himself trailing behind, lost in a labyrinth of his own thoughts. He would watch as Charlotte and Albert walked arm in arm, their heads bent close in intimate conversation. The beauty of nature seemed to mock him in these moments. The vibrant wildflowers and rustling trees, a stark contrast to the desolation he felt inside. As twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, Werther sat at his desk, quill poised over blank parchment. The empty page seemed to taunt him, daring him to give voice to the tempest raging in his heart. With a heavy sigh, he began to write to his friend Wilhelm, his hand moving feverishly across the page as he poured out his conflicted feelings. The ink flowed like blood from an open wound, as Werther described the torment of his daily life, caught between his love for Charlotte and his genuine liking of Albert. As he sealed the letter, a single tear fell onto the parchment, blurring the ink. Werther stared at it, feeling as though that smudge perfectly encapsulated the blur of emotions that had become his existence. As August drew to a close, whispers of an upcoming event began to circulate through Wahlheim. Werther's heart sank as he overheard Charlotte and Albert discussing wedding plans, their voices filled with excitement and anticipation. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Their marriage was no longer a distant concept, but an impending reality. As he stumbled home that evening, the weight of this knowledge pressing down on him like a lead blanket. Werther couldn't help but wonder how he would survive witnessing the union of the woman he loved to another man. The crisp night air carried the first hints of autumn, and with it, the promise of a day that would either break him completely or force him to find a strength he wasn't sure he possessed. The crisp September air heralded the arrival of Charlotte and Albert's wedding day. For Werther, it marked a painful turning point in his emotional journey, a day he had long dreaded but could not avoid. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Werther stood before his mirror, his reflection a stranger to him. His trembling fingers fumbled with each button of his shirt, each one feeling heavier than the last. The weight of his impending heartbreak pressed down on him, making even the simplest tasks a monumental effort. The church bells tolled in the distance, their joyous peals a stark contrast to the storm raging in Werther's heart. He made his way to the church, each step feeling like he was wading through molasses. The air around him buzzed with excitement, filled with the chatter and laughter of guests, but to Werther, it all sounded muffled and distant, as if he were underwater. As he entered the church, the scent of lilies and roses assaulted his senses, making him feel dizzy. The pews were adorned with white ribbons and flowers, a sight that should have been beautiful, but only served to twist the knife in Werther's heart. He took his seat, his body rigid with tension, his hands clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. The ceremony began, and Werther's world narrowed to a pinpoint focus on Charlotte. She glided down the aisle, a vision in white, her face radiant with happiness. Werther's breath caught in his throat, his chest constricting painfully. As Charlotte and Albert exchanged vows, each word felt like a physical blow to Werther. He bit the inside of his cheek until he tasted blood, desperately trying to maintain his composure. The reception was a blur of forced smiles and mechanical movements. Werther danced, his body going through the motions while his mind reeled. Conversations washed over him, meaningless noise that he couldn't process. He watched Charlotte and Albert share their first dance as husband and wife, their eyes locked on each other, oblivious to the world around them. In that moment, Werther felt a piece of his soul wither and die. As the newlyweds departed for their honeymoon, Werther stood alone, feeling adrift in a sea of emptiness. The days that followed were a haze of pain and longing. He found himself drawn back to Charlotte and Albert's home, unable to stay away despite the agony it caused him. The once welcoming rooms now felt alien and hostile, every corner a reminder of what he could never have. Werther's art, once a source of joy and expression, became a mirror of his despair. His sketches filled with barren landscapes and solitary figures, each stroke of his pencil a reflection of the desolation in his soul. He withdrew from social gatherings, finding solace only in the embrace of nature. His walks grew longer and more frequent, taking him to remote areas where he could unleash his anguish without fear of discovery. As autumn painted the world in shades of gold and red, Werther's letters to Wilhelm became his only lifeline. He poured out his heart onto the pages, filling them with philosophical musings on love, loss, and the cruelty of fate. The changing landscape seemed to mock him, the falling leaves a constant reminder of his own declining spirits. One crisp afternoon, Werther found himself standing at the edge of a cliff, the wind whipping around him, carrying away the last vestiges of warmth. He contemplated leaving Wahlheim, escaping the constant reminders of what he could never have. But the thought of being separated from Charlotte, even in her new role as a wife, was unbearable. He found himself trapped in a prison of his own making, unable to stay, yet incapable of leaving. As the days grew shorter and the skies grayer, Werther's inner turmoil intensified. He wandered the countryside like a ghost, caught between his undying love for Charlotte and the excruciating pain of seeing her with Albert. The world around him faded into a blur of muted colors and distant sounds, leaving him adrift in a sea of his own making, yearning for a shore he could never reach. The weight of his despair grew heavier with each passing day, until it felt like a physical presence crushing his chest. As he stood in the fading light of another lonely evening, Werther realized with a sudden, terrifying clarity that he couldn't bear this pain any longer. Something had to change, and soon. With trembling hands, he reached for his pen, determined to pour out his torment one last time. But as he put pen to paper, a new dark thought began to take shape in his mind. Werther's heart was heavy with an unbearable pain. The sight of Charlotte with Albert had become too much for him to bear. As autumn leaves drifted lazily to the ground, Werther made a decision that would change the course of his life. He would leave Wahlheim in November, hoping to escape the torment that consumed his every waking moment. The opportunity came in the form of a diplomatic position in a distant city. Werther clung to this chance like a drowning man to a lifeline, desperately hoping that new responsibilities and unfamiliar surroundings would help him forget Charlotte. As the day of his departure dawned, a maelstrom of emotions threatened to overwhelm him. The crisp air carried the bittersweet scent of fallen leaves and the promise of change. But Werther's heart remained anchored to the past. With trembling hands, he bid farewell to Charlotte and Albert. Their eyes, a swirling mixture of concern and hope, bore into him as they wished him well. Charlotte's gentle touch on his arm sent electricity coursing through his body, a cruel reminder of what he was leaving behind. Albert's firm handshake felt like a door slamming shut on Werther's dreams. As the carriage wheels began to turn, Werther couldn't resist one last look at the familiar landscapes. The rolling hills, now a tapestry of gold and crimson, seemed to wave a melancholy goodbye. The old oak tree where he had spent countless hours reading and daydreaming stood sentinel, its gnarled branches reaching out like arms longing for an embrace. Werther's chest tightened, his unresolved feelings swirling like leaves caught in an autumn gust. The journey to his new post was a blur of unfamiliar faces and landscapes. Upon arrival, Werther threw himself into his diplomatic duties with the fervor of a man trying to outrun his own thoughts. He attended formal gatherings, his forced smile a brittle mask hiding the turmoil within. Political discussions became a welcome distraction, though they paled in comparison to the deep conversations he once shared with Charlotte. The rigid social hierarchy of court life felt like a suffocating corset, constricting Werther's free spirit. His days became an endless parade of meetings, document drafting, and navigating the treacherous waters of social etiquette. Each bow, each carefully worded pleasantry felt like a betrayal of his true self. As weeks bled into months, Werther found the diplomatic world increasingly stifling. The glittering chandeliers and opulent furnishings of the court seemed to mock the simplicity he longed for. In quiet moments, his mind would invariably wander back to Wahlheim, to Charlotte's warm smile, and the genuine connections he had forged there. Tensions simmered between Werther and his superior, the ambassador. The older man's pedantic nature and narrow-minded views on protocol grated on Werther's nerves like sandpaper on raw skin. Their interactions became a delicate dance of veiled insults and thinly disguised contempt, each day bringing fresh frustrations. In a desperate attempt to find solace, Werther sought out cultural experiences in the city. He attended concerts, the swelling music momentarily filling the void in his heart. Art galleries beckoned with their promise of beauty and transcendence. Yet as he stood before masterful paintings, all he could think of were the animated discussions he once had with Charlotte about art and life. Werther's letters to his friend Wilhelm, once filled with passionate outpourings, became infrequent and restrained. The words seemed to stick in his throat, unable to capture the depth of his struggle to find meaning in this new life. The blank pages stared back at him accusingly, a testament to his growing isolation. Try as he might to immerse himself in work in the city's social scene, thoughts of Charlotte continued to haunt Werther like a bittersweet melody. Every new acquaintance paled in comparison to her radiance. The laughter at parties sounded hollow, the conversation superficial. Werther found himself adrift in a sea of faces, longing for the one that had captured his heart. As winter set in, blanketing the city in a cold, white shroud, Werther's loneliness and sense of displacement intensified. The short days and long nights mirrored the darkness growing within him. Doubts crept in like frost on a window pane, leading him to question his decision to leave Wahlheim. One particularly bleak evening, as Werther gazed out at the snow-covered streets, his heart ached for the warmth of Charlotte's presence. The city lights blurred through his tear-filled eyes, and in that moment, he made a decision that would set his world spinning once more. With trembling hands, he began to pack his belongings, his mind racing with possibilities and fears. Would Wahlheim welcome him back? And more importantly, would Charlotte? Werther's journey back to Wahlheim was a whirlwind of emotions. With each passing mile, his heart oscillated between eager anticipation and gnawing anxiety. The familiar landscape unfurled before him like a living tapestry, each hill and valley etched with memories he tried so desperately to forget. The air grew thick with nostalgia, making it hard to breathe. As he crested the final hill, Wahlheim sprawled out below, unchanged and eternal. The old oak in the town square stood sentinel, its gnarled branches reaching skyward like outstretched arms welcoming him home. Cobblestone streets echoed with the rhythm of daily life, a melody both comforting and haunting. Werther's feet carried him along well-worn paths, each step a bittersweet reminder of Charlotte. The babbling brook where they'd shared whispered confidences now seemed to mock him with its cheerful gurgle. In the meadow where they'd once picked wildflowers, he knelt, running his fingers through the grass. The scent of earth and crushed petals filled his nostrils, bringing with it a flood of memories so vivid he could almost feel her hand in his. When Charlotte and Albert greeted him, their smiles were like sunlight breaking through storm clouds, warm, but with the potential to burn. Werther's heart clenched painfully in his chest as he embraced them, the conflicting emotions threatening to tear him apart. Gratitude for their friendship warred with the ache of knowing Charlotte could never be his. "It's wonderful to see you," Charlotte said, her voice as melodious as ever. The brush of her hand against his arm sent electricity coursing through his veins. Werther forced a smile. "And you," he managed, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. In the days that followed, Werther threw himself into his old routines with desperate fervor. He walked for hours, losing himself in nature's embrace. The crunch of leaves underfoot and the whisper of wind through branches became a balm for his troubled soul. As winter's icy grip loosened, giving way to spring's first tentative buds, Werther felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, like the seasons, he too could change and grow. The village children flocked to him, their laughter a temporary respite from his inner turmoil. Werther spun tales of far-off lands and mythical beasts, watching their eyes grow wide with wonder. For brief, shining moments, he could forget the weight of his own heart and bask in their innocent joy. "Tell us about the dragon again, Herr Werther," a little girl with pigtails begged, tugging at his sleeve. Werther chuckled, ruffling her hair. "Very well, but this time, the dragon has 3 heads." Seeking intellectual stimulation, Werther visited the pastor and his wife. Their discussions, once a source of great pleasure, now felt hollow. It was as if a veil had been drawn across his eyes, tinting everything with the bittersweet hue of unrequited love. "What are your thoughts on Rousseau's latest work?" the pastor asked, leaning forward eagerly. Werther paused, struggling to focus. "It's thought-provoking," he replied lamely, unable to summon his usual passion for debate. As days bled into weeks, Wahlheim's charm began to fade. The village that had once seemed an earthly paradise now felt like a gilded cage. Every familiar sight, every cherished memory, became a constant reminder of what he could never have. The walls seemed to close in, the air growing thicker and harder to breathe with each passing day. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire, Werther found himself standing at the edge of town. The road stretched out before him, an invitation and a challenge. His heart raced, torn between the comfort of the familiar and the allure of escape. Just then, a figure appeared in the distance, silhouetted against the fading light. As it drew closer, Werther's breath caught in his throat. It was Charlotte, her hair glowing like a halo in the dying sunlight. She waved, a smile breaking across her face like dawn. "Werther! I was hoping to catch you," she called out, quickening her pace. "Albert and I were wondering if you'd join us for dinner tomorrow." Werther's resolve crumbled like sand. Despite every instinct screaming at him to run, to protect his fragile heart, he found himself nodding. "I'd be delighted," he heard himself say, even as a part of him withered at the thought of being so close, yet so impossibly far from the woman he loved. As Charlotte turned to go, the last rays of sunlight caught her profile, etching it in gold. Werther stood rooted to the spot, watching her retreating form. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that he was about to be drawn back into their orbit. The thought both thrilled and terrified him. Like standing on the edge of a precipice teetering between flight and fall, Werther found himself drawn back into Charlotte and Albert's orbit. He rekindled his friendship with the couple, once again becoming a frequent visitor to their home. The familiar path to their house felt both comforting and treacherous, each step bringing him closer to the woman he loved and the man who stood between them. As he approached their home, the scent of Charlotte's garden washed over him. Roses mingled with freshly cut grass, a heady perfume that transported him to happier times. His heart raced as he knocked on the door, palms sweating with anticipation. Inside, warm candlelight bathed the room in a soft glow, creating shadows that danced on the walls. The flickering flames seemed to mirror the tumultuous emotions swirling within Werther's chest. He settled into an armchair, trying to appear at ease while every nerve in his body thrummed with awareness of Charlotte's presence. Their conversations flowed easily, a testament to their shared history. Werther's voice carried a forced cheerfulness as he regaled them with tales from the city, each anecdote carefully chosen to elicit Charlotte's melodious laughter. The sound was both balm and torture to his lovesick heart. "Oh, Werther, you always did have the most amusing stories," Charlotte said, wiping tears of mirth from her eyes. Her casual touch sent electricity coursing through his veins. Werther's imagination ran wild, painting vivid pictures of a life where such touches were commonplace between them. He began to see signs of reciprocation in her every action, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when he spoke, or how her eyes seemed to seek him out across the room. Desperate for any moment alone with Charlotte, Werther volunteered for the most mundane tasks. "Let me help you with the dishes," he offered one evening, his heart pounding at the prospect of standing close to her in the quiet kitchen. As they stood side by side at the sink, the scent of Charlotte's perfume enveloped him. The soft rustle of her dress and the warmth of her presence overwhelmed his senses. Werther fumbled with a plate, nearly dropping it as their hands brushed. "Careful," Charlotte murmured, steadying his grip. Her touch lingered for a heartbeat too long, and Werther's breath caught in his throat. Albert watched their interactions with increasing wariness. His arm would snake around Charlotte's waist possessively when Werther entered the room, a subtle reminder of the unbreachable barrier between them. The easy camaraderie of their trio began to fray at the edges, replaced by an undercurrent of tension that crackled like static in the air. Group conversations became a minefield of awkward pauses and loaded glances. Werther caught Albert's eyes narrowing as he spoke passionately about a poem, the words thinly veiling his true feelings for Charlotte. "Love, like a delicate flower, must be tended with care," Werther said, his gaze fixed on Charlotte. "Neglected, it withers and dies." Albert cleared his throat pointedly. "Some flowers once picked belong to another's garden," he countered, tightening his grip on Charlotte's hand. Charlotte herself seemed caught in the middle, her smiles becoming strained as she attempted to navigate the shifting dynamics. "Perhaps we should change the subject," she suggested, her voice tight with discomfort. As days turned into weeks, Werther's emotional state became increasingly volatile. One moment, he'd be soaring on the high of a kind word from Charlotte, convinced that their love was destined to overcome all obstacles. The next, he'd plummet into the depths of despair, the gold band on Charlotte's finger a cruel reminder of reality. In quiet moments alone, Werther tortured himself with visions of Charlotte and Albert's married life. He imagined them sharing tender moments, whispering words of love, building a future together, a future that had no place for him. The pain of these thoughts was almost physical, a dull ache that never quite subsided. "I'm a ship lost at sea," Werther confided to his journal one sleepless night, "and Charlotte is both my North Star and the rocky shore that will be my undoing." As spring began to wane, Werther found himself standing at a precipice. His love for Charlotte burned brighter than ever, a flame that threatened to consume everything in its path. Yet the reality of her commitment to Albert loomed before him like an insurmountable wall. On the last day of spring, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink, Werther made a decision. He would confess his feelings to Charlotte, consequences be damned. As he strode towards their house, purpose in every step, the air around him seemed to crackle with possibility and danger. Little did Werther know that the changing seasons would bring more than just warmer weather. The gentle warmth of spring was about to give way to the sweltering heat of summer, and with it, a storm of emotions that would push him to the very edge of reason. The gentle warmth of spring gave way to the sweltering heat of summer. As the seasons shifted, so too did Werther's behavior, taking a turn for the erratic and emotional. The sun beat down mercilessly on the village, its rays seeming to penetrate Werther's very soul. The once lush greenery wilted under the oppressive heat, mirroring the withering of Werther's once stable demeanor. He found himself caught in a whirlwind of emotions, his moods as unpredictable as summer storms. In Charlotte's presence, Werther soared to dizzying heights. Her laughter was a cool breeze on a scorching day, her smile a balm to his troubled heart. But when she was gone, he plummeted into the depths of despair. The absence of her light left him fumbling in darkness, lost and alone. Werther's appearance began to reflect the chaos within. His once impeccable attire now hung loosely on his frame, wrinkled and stained. Stubble shadowed his jaw, giving him a wild, unkempt look. His hair, usually neatly combed, now resembled a bird's nest. The spark in his eyes flickered uncertainly, sometimes blazing with manic energy, other times dimming to a dull, lifeless gleam. His artistic sanctuary, once a haven of creativity, transformed into a whirlwind of discarded ideas. Canvases leaned haphazardly against walls, their surfaces marred by frenzied brushstrokes. Half-finished sketches littered the floor like fallen leaves, crunching under his restless feet as he paced. The air was thick with the acrid smell of turpentine and the musty scent of drying paint. As summer progressed, Werther withdrew from the world around him. The once vibrant village life now seemed hollow and meaningless. The cheerful chatter of neighbors, the laughter of children playing in the streets, all of it grated on his nerves. He shunned invitations, his absence at local gatherings becoming a topic of hushed conversation. "Have you seen young Werther lately?" villagers would whisper. "He looks like a man possessed." Werther's art, once a joyous expression of life's beauty, morphed into a dark reflection of his inner turmoil. His paintings became windows into a troubled soul. Stormy skies and turbulent seas dominated his canvases, the angry swirls of color mirroring the tempest in his heart. Figures writhed in anguish, their faces contorted in expressions of longing and despair. Each brushstroke seemed to scream of unrequited love and unattainable desires. In the dead of night, when the world lay silent, Werther's torment found voice in his letters to Wilhelm. His once eloquent prose devolved into fragmented thoughts and dark musings. The scratching of his quill on paper was the only sound in the stillness, punctuated by the occasional creak of floorboards as he paced. "Wilhelm," he wrote, his handwriting erratic, "I fear I am losing my mind. Charlotte consumes my every thought. Her absence is a physical ache, a void that nothing can fill. There are moments when the weight of my emotions threatens to crush me, when the temptation to end it all whispers seductively in my ear." Death, once a distant and fearsome concept, began to take on a romantic allure in Werther's mind. He spoke of it in hushed, reverent tones, as if it were a lover waiting to embrace him. In his fevered imagination, death became a gateway to peace, a release from the exquisite agony of loving Charlotte. Charlotte and Albert watched Werther's decline with growing alarm. Their concern was etched in worried glances and whispered conversations. They struggled to maintain the delicate balance of friendship while creating necessary distance, acutely aware of the dangerous intensity of Werther's attachment. Charlotte, in particular, found herself caught in a web of conflicting emotions. Guilt gnawed at her, a constant companion as she questioned her role in Werther's downward spiral. The weight of responsibility sat heavy on her shoulders, a burden she couldn't shake. As summer reached its zenith, Werther's passion curdled into something darker. Jealousy and resentment took root in his heart, twisting his once pure love into something unrecognizable. Albert's presence, once welcomed, now grated on Werther's nerves. He saw his friend not as a companion, but as an insurmountable obstacle standing between him and happiness. In the stifling heat of midsummer nights, Werther's thoughts circled endlessly, a maelstrom of longing and despair. Charlotte's image haunted his every waking moment, her voice echoing in his dreams. Reason and perspective crumbled in the face of his all-consuming love, leaving Werther adrift in a sea of tumultuous emotions with no shore in sight. As the last days of summer waned, a chill crept into the air, heralding the approach of autumn. Werther stood at his window, watching leaves turn golden and fall. A strange calm settled over him, but it was the calm before a storm. In the depths of his tortured mind, a seed had been planted, a dark, insidious thought that whispered of final release. As night fell, Werther picked up his pen, his hand steady for the first time in months. "My dear Wilhelm," he began, "I believe I have found a solution to my suffering." As autumn's chill crept into the air, Werther's thoughts turned increasingly dark. The idea of suicide began to take root in his mind, a tempting escape from his emotional turmoil. The crisp December afternoon of the 20th dawned with a biting wind that seemed to mirror the emptiness in Werther's heart. Bare trees lined his path to Albert and Charlotte's home, their skeletal branches reaching towards a steel-gray sky. Each step crunched on frost-covered leaves, the sound echoing the finality of his decision. Werther's breath clouded before him as he approached the house, its warm glow a stark contrast to the coldness that had settled in his chest. He hesitated at the door, his hand trembling slightly as he knocked. A part of him yearned for one last glimpse of Charlotte's face, while another dreaded the pain it would bring. Albert's cordial greeting felt like a blow to Werther's fragile composure. If only his friend knew the storm raging within him. The study's warmth enveloped Werther as he settled in, the crackling fire a counterpoint to the icy resolve in his heart. As they talked, the conversation took an unexpected turn. Werther's eyes blazed with a feverish intensity as he broached the subject of suicide. "Is it not the right of every man to end his suffering?" he argued, his words tumbling out in a passionate torrent. "When life becomes unbearable, should we not have the freedom to choose our exit?" Albert's measured response cut through Werther's emotional plea like a knife through butter. "Suicide is an act of cowardice, Werther. It's a permanent solution to temporary problems." The logical arguments hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. As they debated, Werther's gaze wandered to the wall where Albert's pistols hung. The polished metal gleamed in the firelight, drawing his attention like a siren's call. In that moment, everything crystallized for him. The weight of his decision settled on his shoulders, almost tangible in its intensity. "Albert," Werther said, his voice suddenly calm, a stark contrast to the turmoil within. "Might I borrow your pistols? I'm planning a journey and could use the protection." The lie tasted bitter on his tongue, but he forced a smile. Albert, oblivious to the true intent behind the request, nodded without hesitation. "Of course, my friend. Take them with my blessing." The casual words felt like a death sentence to Werther. Charlotte, who had been silently observing the exchange, felt a chill run down her spine. Something in Werther's tone, in the set of his shoulders, spoke of finality. She wanted to speak up, to voice her concerns, but the words caught in her throat, trapped behind a wall of propriety and unspoken feelings. As Werther took the pistols from the wall, the weight of them in his hands felt like destiny. He handled them with a mixture of reverence and determination, as if they held the key to his salvation. The cool metal against his palms seemed to whisper promises of peace. Before leaving, Werther turned to Charlotte. Their eyes met, and in that moment, a lifetime of unspoken words passed between them. Regret, longing, and a bittersweet acceptance flowed in that silent exchange. Charlotte's heart raced, a sense of impending loss overwhelming her. The setting sun cast long shadows across the lawn as Werther walked away, the pistols tucked safely under his coat. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the earth itself was trying to hold him back. Charlotte watched his figure disappear into the gathering darkness, unable to shake the feeling that she was witnessing the end of something profound. The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving behind a room heavy with the weight of unspoken words and unfulfilled desires. In the silence that followed, the ticking of the clock seemed to count down the moments of a life about to be cut short. As Werther stepped into the cold night air, a sudden gust of wind whipped around him, carrying with it the faint scent of Charlotte's perfume. He paused, his hand clutching the pistols beneath his coat. For a brief moment, doubt flickered in his mind. Was he truly ready to leave this world behind? The thought of Charlotte's face etched with sorrow made his resolve waver. But then the wind died down, and with it, his last thread of hope. Werther took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come, and disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind only footprints in the frost and the lingering question of what the dawn would bring. Werther trudged back to his lodgings, his mind weighed down by the gravity of his decision. He knew with a heavy heart that his time in this world was drawing to a close. The room seemed to shrink around him as he entered, the familiar walls now feeling like a cage. Shadows danced across the floor, cast by the flickering candlelight that struggled against the encroaching darkness. With trembling hands, Werther began to sort through his belongings, each item a bittersweet reminder of a life soon to be left behind. Papers rustled beneath his fingers as he sifted through letters and sketches. The crackling fire in the hearth beckoned, and Werther found himself tossing handfuls of memories into the flames. He watched as the edges curled and blackened, years of hopes and dreams reduced to ash in moments. A few precious items he set aside: a book of poetry, a sketch of a sunset, a pressed flower from a long-ago walk. These would be his final gifts, silent messengers of his affection to those he held dear. The thought of their faces upon receiving these mementos sent a pang through his chest. As twilight painted the sky in hues of purple and orange, Werther settled at his desk. The scratch of pen on paper broke the heavy silence as he poured his heart out to Charlotte one last time. Words flowed like a river, carrying his undying love and the ache of his decision. Tears threatened to smudge the ink as he penned his final request: to be buried in the blue coat and yellow waistcoat he wore when they first met, the fabric still holding the essence of that magical day. The clock struck midnight, its chimes echoing through the quiet night like a funeral knell. December 22nd had arrived, bringing with it the weight of finality. Werther's hands shook as he reached for Albert's pistols, the cold metal a stark contrast to the warmth of his memories. He found a strange comfort in the pages of Emilia Galati, the tragic tale mirroring his own torment. Time seemed to slow, each tick of the clock stretching into eternity as Werther raised the pistol to his head. A moment of hesitation gripped him, Charlotte's smile flashing before his eyes. Then, with a deafening bang that shattered the stillness, the shot rang out like a clap of thunder. Footsteps pounded up the stairs, urgent and panicked. Werther's servant, startled by the noise, burst through the door. The scene that greeted him was one of horror. Werther lay crumpled on the floor, blood pooling around him, clinging to life by a thread. The servant's cry for help echoed through the house, but true to Werther's wishes, no doctor was summoned. For 12 agonizing hours, Werther lingered in a twilight between life and death. His consciousness ebbed and flowed like the tide, each moment of clarity bringing fresh waves of pain. In his lucid moments, Charlotte's name fell from his lips like a prayer, intermingled with pleas for forgiveness. As noon approached on December 23rd, the air in the room grew thick and heavy, as if death itself were pressing down upon them. Werther's breathing became labored, each intake of air a struggle against the inevitable. With his last ounce of strength, he whispered Charlotte's name one final time, the sound barely audible in the hushed room. And then, like a candle flame extinguished by a gentle breeze, Werther's tormented existence came to an end. The room fell silent, the absence of his labored breathing more deafening than any sound. But even as Werther's story came to a close, another was just beginning. For in that moment, unbeknownst to the grieving household, a rider was galloping toward the town, bearing news that would shake Wahlheim to its very core. The news of Werther's suicide spread through Wahlheim like wildfire. It ignited a storm of emotions throughout the community, forever altering the quiet town's landscape. A heavy fog had settled over Wahlheim, mirroring the somber mood that gripped its inhabitants. The usual cheerful chatter in the streets was replaced by hushed whispers and shocked gasps as the tragic news traveled from house to house, shop to shop. Charlotte stood frozen in her parlor, the world around her suddenly muffled and distant. The teacup she had been holding slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. The sound barely registered as the blood rushed in her ears, drowning out everything but the terrible news. Her vision blurred, the room spinning wildly. "Werther, dead?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The weight of guilt and sorrow crashed over her like a tidal wave. Her knees buckled, and she crumpled to the ground, her skirts billowing around her. The rough texture of the carpet against her cheek was the last thing she felt before darkness claimed her. Frantic voices pierced the fog of unconsciousness. Charlotte's eyelids fluttered open to see concerned faces hovering above her. The acrid smell of smelling salts stung her nostrils as a doctor waved a vial beneath her nose. She coughed weakly, struggling to sit up. "Easy now, madam," the doctor murmured, his hand steady on her arm. "You've had quite a shock." Charlotte's eyes darted around the room, taking in the worried faces of her family. Their voices blended into a cacophony of concern, but she couldn't focus on their words. In her mind's eye, she saw only Werther's face, his passionate gaze, his tender smile. A sob caught in her throat. Meanwhile, Albert paced the length of their bedroom, his footsteps echoing like thunderclaps in the oppressive silence. His fists clenched and unclenched rhythmically, knuckles white with tension. Grief and anger warred within him, each emotion threatening to tear him apart. "Damn you, Werther," he muttered, voice thick with unshed tears. "How could you do this? To yourself, to Charlotte, to all of us?" He longed to comfort his wife, but the turmoil in his own heart held him back. How could he offer solace when he himself felt so lost? Outside, Wahlheim buzzed with conflicting emotions. The tavern was packed, the air thick with pipe smoke and heated debate. Men slammed their tankards on rough wooden tables, voices rising in passionate argument. "Poor lad," an old farmer said, wiping a tear from his weathered cheek. "Love's a cruel mistress, make no mistake." "Bah," spat a burly blacksmith. "Coward's way out, if you ask me. No thought for those left behind." The debate raged on, fueled by ale and the shock of sudden tragedy. Werther's servant found himself at the center of unwanted attention. Villagers cornered him at every turn, eyes hungry for details of his master's final moments. With each retelling, his voice grew hoarser, his eyes more haunted. "He was consumed," the servant whispered to a group of wide-eyed listeners in the marketplace. "By love, by life itself." It was as if this world was too small to contain his passion. As twilight fell, a solemn procession wound its way through Wahlheim's narrow streets. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and fresh-turned earth. Werther's coffin, borne on the shoulders of local workmen, seemed to glow faintly in the gathering darkness. The absence of a priest or religious ceremony hung in the air like a challenge. Even in death, Werther defied convention, just as he had in life. At the edge of the churchyard, beneath the gnarled branches of ancient linden trees, a small group gathered. Children Werther had befriended stood silent, clutching wilted wildflowers in their tiny fists. As the coffin was lowered into the earth, the church bells began to toll, their mournful song echoing across the valley. In the days that followed, Charlotte and Albert moved through their home like ghosts. The room seemed to echo with unspoken words and unfulfilled promises. They spoke little, each lost in a labyrinth of regret and what-ifs. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the rhythms of village life reasserted themselves. The market square filled once more with the sounds of haggling and laughter. Fields were tended, bread was baked, and life went on. Yet something had changed in Wahlheim. The memory of the passionate young artist who had loved too deeply had seeped into the very soil of the town. In quiet moments, when the wind whispered through the linden trees, the villagers would pause. They remembered the brief, bright flame that was Werther, and wondered at the power of a love that could consume so completely. As summer faded into autumn, Charlotte found herself walking alone in the churchyard. She knelt beside Werther's grave, her fingers tracing the simple inscription on the headstone. A single tear fell, disappearing into the earth. "Goodbye, Werther," she whispered. "May you find the peace in death that eluded you in life." Rising, Charlotte took a deep breath. The air was crisp with the promise of change. She turned and walked back towards the village, towards Albert, towards a future forever touched by the memory of a love both beautiful and tragic. The linden trees rustled softly in the breeze, as if whispering a final farewell to the young man who had loved not wisely, but too well.
This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.